Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Dear students, welcome to lecture 7, where we will discuss the swarm intelligence techniques in the course of CS352 Introduction to Soft Computing. I have divided lecture 7 into 4 different subtopics. At first, I'll introduce you to the concept and definition of swarm intelligence and the various properties and background that is necessary to learn more about swarm intelligence techniques. Then in lecture 7.2, which will also be conducted this week, we'll be talking about a specific algorithm related to swarm intelligence, which is called ant colony optimization algorithm, and that will be all for week 11. Then in week 12, we'll be discussing particle swarm optimization techniques, and this will be followed by section 7.4, which is importance and applications of swarm intelligence in practical or real life situations. Let us formally begin the lecture series of lecture 7 on swarm intelligence. This is a lecture on section 7.1, where I'll be introducing the basic concepts of swarm intelligence, including the definition, properties, the natural counterparts from which the swarm intelligence is inspired, and many other examples, and finally concluding my whole talk by summarizing the salient features. So first, I'll be introducing you to the agenda for section 7.1. I'll basically be talking about the different types of search problems we have covered so far. Then we'll be talking about the collective behavior of natural systems that exist and how they are actually working together to reach a certain goal. Then I'll discuss about the common properties of these particular systems. It will then be followed by the idea or by the explanation of the idea collective approach. Then I'll introduce the term swarm intelligence and swarm intelligence systems. It will be followed by talking about the different properties that exist in swarm intelligence and how they're mapped to different algorithms. Basically, conversion of properties to algorithms, and then we'll see around 13 different algorithms of swarm intelligence, although in this particular series I'll be only talking about 2 of these algorithms and not more. And finally, a summary or concluding remarks on the whole section. So now I'll take you back to the start of the course and the different search techniques that we have discussed during this course. The very simplest ones and the straightforward ones we discussed were basically uninformed search problems. And if you remember, we talked about depth first search, breadth first search, uniform cost search, and how they're applied, their goals, and when these particular techniques are used. Then after uninformed search problems, we discussed the informed search problems where some heuristics were involved. And if you remember, we talked about 2 of these techniques. One of them was the greedy search technique, greedy best first or greedy search as it is called. And the other technique was the A star search technique, which was a combination of greedy search technique and the uniform cost search technique. We saw different examples of both of these, and that was all about informed search problems. Then after the informed search problems and uninformed search problems, we discuss the local search problems, which are also called optimization problems. In this particular part, we discuss three different techniques, namely simulated annealing, gradient ascent or gradient descent, or hill climbing, and the third one was genetic algorithms. The main purpose of these particular techniques was that we were not interested, we did not know the goal actually, we did not know the path either, and we are not interested in the path. The only thing that we are interested in is an estimate of a good enough state which represents the goal state. So that is all about the optimization problems. Notice that in this particular category of problems, it doesn't matter if we have reached the goal state or if we are very close to the best value. We just need a good enough estimate that satisfies our constraints, and that's all. And the final search technique that we discussed in quite a lot of detail was adversarial search problems. This was a topic of my last week's and basically the week prior to that, the lectures series lecture 6. That was a topic that we had discussed. The main thing is that in adversarial search techniques, there are basically two or more players who are competing against each other to win a particular game. And when I talk about games, I actually mean, for example, two-player or multiplayer games. For example, chess, for example, Go, for example, tic-tac-toe. And that is the state that where we are at the moment. So, summarizing the four or five techniques that we have discussed, I'll just say that it's basically a turn-by-turn game or a turn-by-turn solution, where the purpose is either to find the goal state, which is unknown, or in case it is known, we will want to find the path to it. Or the third scenario is that the goal state doesn't matter at all, and the only thing that matters is we need a good enough estimate, that is optimization or local search problems. And finally, there's another type of problem where two or more players are participating, and it's all against all, like every player is against every other player, and that's the main topic of adversarial search techniques. Now, having built up on so much on the search techniques, I'll now move on to taking up some natural systems and seeing the behavior of those systems, and see how we can optimize our solution or results using the optimized version that is given by these natural systems. So let's start with the behavior of these natural systems, and then we'll move on to how we can characterize them, if we can find their relative properties, and using those properties can we come up with an algorithm or a set of algorithms that can mimic that particular behavior. So the first natural system that we're going to discuss for this lecture series is the ants colony system. Ants are really simple organisms with very limited functions that they can perform, but these unsophisticated animals are really complex in terms of the goals that they accomplish and the work that they do. For example, they construct nests that are hundreds of times larger than their builders, that are very well organized and structured, so that the nest itself can support the communal coexistence of a huge number of individuals, usually in millions of ants. For example, we can compare this to some very large city, Karachi or Lahore, and even there's a network of different or connection between different hives as well at times, and each nest itself is spread over multiple kilometers, and it has got storage spaces, it has got nurseries, it has got chambers, it has got graveyards, it has got temperature control system, it has got food supplies, it has got classes of workers, it has got warriors, and the list goes on and on. So this is a really complex system, and the ants have established that the way this really works is through the coordination between individual ants. Each individual ant itself cannot do the whole job. It is basically how different ants support the other ants so that the overall function or the overall goal is achieved. So this leads to let's say from an unintelligent and unsophisticated organism to a really complex intelligent goal that can be achieved by working together. So a specific case that I really long want to discuss over here is the drowning of fire ants. If I take it as a case study, if I take a single ant, it will drown in water in no time. But the fire ants have developed a specific mechanism where when they're drowning, they actually hold hands together and form really long chains. And because of that chain mechanism, not even a single ant is going to die. And they all float, they all form basically a ball of fire ant together, and that fire ant kind of floats on top of water and no one dies. So these ants have learned to survive in case of flood or in case of any extra water that seeps in into their hives. They have learned that by being together they can survive. So I gave one example of drowning in water of fire ants, a specific species of ants, and how they survive it by working together. But that is one part. The common ant is known for finding the shortest path to food source. So if you leave some food particle somewhere, an ant is going to surely reach it, and then you'll see all the worker ants converging to that particular food source and getting food from there and taking it back to or transporting it back to their own colony. So there are a lot of amazing things that an ant does when it actually reaches the food. For example, the shortest path to food is actually found without using many complicated systems or stimuli or planning. Ants actually find the shortest paths to food and take it back on that path. And the phenomena that they use, of course, we'll discuss that later in the ant colony optimization problem. But what we need to remember at the moment is that ants are really simple and unsophisticated organisms, but they are amazing in terms of the functions that they're able to do. So the traveling salesman problem, for example, is kind of solved by using ant colony optimization algorithm, and that's amazing because it's inspired from how ants behave generally in a colony. So after ants, let us talk about another very important natural system which thrives by the collective behavior. So bees are known to be very important social contributor to life on earth, mainly because they are. So, how many times have you seen a flock of birds that is flying high up in the sky, and you see that they look so much coordinated? When one turns, I think everyone else also turns, and when one dives, everyone else also dives. So, the flock of birds seems to be very coordinated, and one is bound to think that they have practiced a lot. Like, think of humans who are trying to dance, for example, and it takes a lot of practice and a lot of working together to get that coordination going. But in case of birds that are flocking together, that's not the case. And again, if you look at the amount of coordination that they've got, it's just amazing. It's just utterly unbelievable. That's what I call it. And that behavior of birds flocking together and reaching a particular goal, even for example, the goal could be to survive from a particular prey or an eagle who is trying to attack them, and to confuse it, and so on. Well, birds achieve unbelievably good rate at doing that when they move in flocks, and their movement is so much synchronous that one is amazed by it. So again, this is another example of birds that are of a natural animal, of a natural phenomena, where working together collectively helps you achieve your goal. It helps you achieve a really intelligent thing that you would not have been able to do if you were doing it alone. A particular way of. And now coming to my last example for a national system where individuals are coordinating with other individuals without having a central coordinator or central person who's making them coordinate, is basically the herds of animals. So for example, cows or sheep or deers or any of the four-hoofed animals, even for example elephants or for that matter, they all have got an amazing herding sense. So you'll see them all move in the same direction and kind of go together in groups, and in those groups you hardly see them running away from each other. They stay together, and by staying together they are able to kind of fight against or kind of save themselves. This is their survival instinct or survival mode against predators that are much stronger and maybe even faster. So sheep herding or animal herding is another of the natural systems where much more intelligence is achieved than if you were single alone. Fishing, I would say, if you ask a fisherman, is this brings us to define the common properties of all of these natural systems. You have seen how ants build really complex colonies, and if you kind of put molten aluminium inside the ant colony, you are going to see a structure that is really large, up to maybe a few meters down in the earth, and it's really complex as well. It's not a straight line or something, but it's an extremely complex structure. Similarly, if you see schools of fish, you might see billions of fish in one school, and sometimes this school could be as long as up to 3 miles long. And in this large school of fish, they're able to keep themselves safe from larger predators like even whales, for example, and they have achieved a lot of success by staying together. Similarly, we see birds that are flying together, and they tend to fly together in groups. And the funny thing is that, or the impressive thing, I should say, not funny but impressive thing, is that no two birds strike each other, they don't hit each other, and they're all flying in same directions or in same groups. Similarly, we saw the example of fire ants, where they won't actually drown, but by sticking together and forming a large mass of ant balls, let's say, they're able to survive and not drown in water. And another example that we saw was of bees, where bees stick together, and by doing that they are able to accomplish a lot. So what is common among all these 5-6 different systems? Well, I'll have to come up with some of the commonalities or the properties. First thing is that all of these systems are composed of many individuals. Secondly, the individuals are relatively homogeneous, that is, they are all either identical or they all belong to the same group or topologies. The third thing that I noticed as a property would be that the interaction among the individuals are based on simple behavior rules that exploit only local information that the individuals exchange directly or via the environment. This is called stigmergy. Stigmergy is basically a term that is used to represent that two or more organisms are communicating directly with each other. Then another property that I have noticed is that the overall behavior of the system results from the interactions of individuals with each other and with their environment. That is the group behavior, and the group behavior is basically self-organized and not dictated by someone from the outside or someone from the inside. It's basically organized by its own self. And then another characterizing property of all of these systems is that its ability to act in a coordinated way without the presence of a coordinator or of an external controller, and as a reaction sometimes to an external threat as well. So these 4 or 5 properties would basically be the common things to define swarm intelligence as well. So this is really amazing what we have seen so far. How can the individual members of a colony of ants, which seem to be unsophisticated to us, construct nests that are hundreds of times larger than their builders, organized and structured so as to support the communal coexistence of a huge number of individuals, comparable to cities or even networks of cities extending over multiple kilometers, with storage spaces, with nurseries, with chambers, with graveyards, with temperature control, with food supplies, with various classes of workers, for example warriors or worker bees or workers ants, and the list goes on and on and on. So it's really amazing. This is because of the collective system. So what is a collective system? Collective systems are often capable of learning, adapting to change, exhibiting resilience against unexpected scenarios, etc., not at individual levels but as a group. The distinctive feature of these approaches is that the individuals that make up the swarm usually behave very simply and in general reactively, which is of great interest for computational approaches. Distributed models, for example individual based, agent based, or based on some representation of the interactions, etc., portray the phenomena at a level that allows us to observe the formation of organization and the emergence of shapes within the group. They allow us to model, describe, and study the interaction of individuals with other individuals and with the environment. Explicitly modeling these interactions allows us to observe several things. For example, it allows us to observe the creation of subgroups of individuals within the population. It allows us to observe the construction of elements in the environment. It allows us to observe the way that castes operate. It allows us to observe the feedback effects exerted by these elements on these subgroups and the overall population. So of course there is a lot more in this list, and this is the 4 or 5 things that I mentioned is not exhaustive. However, it does indeed show that individual based modeling provides a range of essential elements that we can adapt and exploit for other purposes as well. So to summarize, I think I need to define the collective approach. And what do we mean by collective approach? Well, the definition is behavior of a population of individuals with simple capacities whose local, inter-individual and environmental interactions result in the emergence and execution of a global project that is not explicitly programmed. So the result itself is kind of not programmed in there, and people are working on their own and of their own intelligence actually to finally move towards a common goal together. And while this definition is of course might seem incomplete, as it does not appear to specify how this global project will be executed. For example, it only speaks of simple behavior at the levels of individuals who have no global perspective and no understanding of the global project. The answer of course lies in the very large number of interactions between individuals and with the environment. So that brings us to the topic of swarm intelligence and swarm intelligence systems. Swarm intelligence is the collective behavior of decentralized, self-organized systems, natural or artificial. The concept is employed in work on AI. The SI systems consist typically of a population of simple agents or boids interacting locally with one another and with their environment. The inspiration often comes from nature, like we have seen earlier, especially biological systems. The agents follow very simple rules, and although there is no centralized control structure dictating how individual agents should behave, local and to a certain degree random interactions between such agents leads to the emergence of intelligent global behavior, which is unknown to the individual agents. Examples of these swarm agents that we've already seen in natural systems is basically ant colonies, is bird flocking, is hawks hunting together in groups at times, animal herding, bacterial growth, fish schooling, and microbial intelligence. The application of swarm principles to robots is called swarm robotics. So it's a whole field out there that is very interesting. While swarm intelligence refers to the more general set of algorithms. So you need to differentiate between swarm robotics and swarm algorithms as well, or swarm intelligence as well. Swarm prediction has been used in the context of forecasting problems. Similar approaches to those proposed for swarm robotics are considered for genetically modified organisms in synthetic collective intelligence. So with that, I think with these examples and stuff, now we can talk about some very important thing, which is the principles used in swarm intelligence. The first principle is basically self-organization, which is based on activity amplification by positive feedback activity, balancing by negative feedback amplification of random fluctuations. The second thing is the multiple interaction stigmergy, which is simulated by work, which is based on work on behavioral responses to the environmental state, an environment that serves as a work state memory work that does not depend on specific agents. So there are two main principles. One is self-organization, the other is simulation by work, and both are kind of extremely necessary for all of the natural systems that we have seen in the earlier slides. That they usually look for schools of fish that are swimming together, and they attack that particular school. So with the definition of swarm intelligence out of the way, I think, and the properties as well that we have discussed, we need to convert these properties to algorithms. Many examples can be observed in nature of swarms that perform some collective behavior without any individual controlling the group or being aware of the overall group behavior. Notwithstanding the lack of individuals in charge of the group, the swarm as a whole can show an intelligent behavior. This is the result of the interaction of spatially neighboring individuals that act on the basis of simple rules. Most often, the behavior of each individual of the swarm is described in probabilistic terms. So we need to use probability, and we've seen something similar done for Markov chains and Markov models. Each individual has a stochastic behavior that depends on his local perception of the neighborhood. Because of the above properties, it is possible to design swarm intelligence systems that are scalable, that are parallel, and that are fault tolerant. So what do I mean by scalability? Scalability means that a system can maintain its function while increasing its size without the need to redefine the way its parts interact. So because in the swarm intelligence system, interactions involve only neighboring individuals, the number of interactions tends not to grow with the overall number of individuals in the swarm. Each of these particular swarms or each of these individuals' behavior is only loosely influenced by the swarm dimension. In artificial systems, scalability is interesting because a scalable system can increase the performance by simply increasing its size without the need for any reprogramming. The other thing that we talked about was parallel action. Parallel action is possible in swarm intelligence systems because individuals composing the swarm can perform different actions in different places at the same time. In artificial systems, parallel action is desirable because it can help to make the system more flexible, that is capable to self-organize in teams that take care simultaneously of different aspects of a complex task. Finally, the fault tolerance is of course an inherent property of swarm intelligence systems due to the decentralized, self-organized nature of their control structure. Because the system is composed of many interchangeable individuals and none of them is in charge of controlling the overall system, behavior, a failing individual can be easily dismissed and substituted by another one that is fully functional. The models developed so far by biologists and by computer scientists allow us to simulate some of the behavior of some kind of social and eusocial animals. And we've seen a lot of other examples here, and I'm not going to give those examples again. But these models are based on formalism, often quite simple, which describe the behavior of individual within a group, and rather than a description of the general evolution of the group. Okay, so after you've seen a lot of the basics of swarm intelligence in particular, I think it's time that we start discussing about what are the actual algorithms that are used by scientists to solve different problems related to swarm intelligence. I'll just name 13 of these, and if you want to see the definition of these, I think I'll be discussing two of them in lectures 7.2 and 7.3. For others that are given here, you need to go to probably the additional reading list given here, and there you will find a page that takes you to these algorithms. And if you're interested in a particular algorithm, you just need to go onto that page and search it and look at it. So do go to the reading section, and if you're interested, you will find more information over there. The names of these algorithms are altruism algorithm. Then we've got ant colony optimization that I'm going to discuss in section 7.2. Then I've got artificial bee colony algorithm. I've got artificial immune systems. I've got PAT algorithm. I've got gravitational search algorithm. Then I've got glowworm optimization. Then we've got intelligent water drops. We have got particle swarm optimization that I'm going to discuss in section 7.3. Then we've got river formation dynamics. We have got self-propelled particles. We have stochastic diffusion search. We have got multi-swarm optimization. So I'll only be discussing 2 and 9 in the upcoming lectures, but if someone is interested, he can always talk to me, or he can go through the given links and find out more details. Yeah, with nets, and if they do so, they are able to catch. So to summarize this section, what we have discussed so far is the basics of swarm intelligence. Simply saying, the word swarm basically means where multiple things work together and to achieve a particular goal, and there is no centralized system, there is no central ruler, there is no one who is coordinating the moves, and it's just you just have the local information of your neighborhood only, and based on that you're deciding your movements and moves, and because of those things, the change in everyone else's neighborhood is observed, and they react accordingly to finally reach their to maintain the stigmergy or the common reaction to a particular event. After we saw that, we then moved on to define the topic, and we also discussed different examples, different natural systems where we observe these coordinations between different organisms, and the main thing is that in all of these organisms, the individual organisms are really dumb. That's what I say. But in the achievement or the goal that these so-called dumb organisms make by working together, that is amazing. So what you need to understand is that the power of working collectively for a goal is much more than if you work alone for it, and that is the exact principle that is used or deployed in swarm intelligence. And then there are different properties of swarm intelligence, and we saw that, and we saw the details. With that, I think we are done with this particular section. You also saw different algorithms, and we're going to discuss two of those in the next slides in the next lectures. So do go and read the additional reading part. You might find some really interesting videos out there that I've made specially for telling you about the natural systems and the way they have evolved over time, and the way they actually, despite being very simple organisms, work together to achieve really complex goals. In the next section, I'll be talking about one of these algorithms, the ant colony optimization algorithm, and we'll discuss the pseudocode and the working of this particular algorithm. It's really simple, but you need to keep in mind the different properties and how those are translated to the algorithm. With that, I'd like to say thank you for listening to this lecture, and you're always welcome to ask me questions anytime. I'll kind of work on with the next lecture, and thanks for listening, thanks for tuning in. If not less, at least a few 100,000 of fish in one go, and it is only possible because fishes also stick together, and you see the term school of fish or shoal of fish is used very commonly. I'll just explain both of these terms before moving on. In biology, any group of fish that stay together for social reasons are shoaling, and if the group is swimming in the same direction in a coordinated manner, they are schooling. So again, if you see a school of fish, it's amazing. They are all swimming in the same direction. No one is striking at their fish. There is no one that gets hit, and no one is coordinating them. They are all free of. On their own will. No one is making them do